Prema, one of the biggest and most illustrious feeder series team in motorsports history, have announced that they will be opening an Indycar team starting in 2025. Prema has had many notable drivers like Robert Kubica, Kamui Kobayashi, Charles Leclerc, and Oscar Piastri, and has some upcoming talent like Freddie Slater, Dorian Pin, Kimi Antonelli, and Ollie Behrman. Clearly, Prema doesn't mess around in motorsport, and they've had these notable drivers for a reason. That being said, Prema won't settle for racing at the back of the grid. With McLaren kicking off silly season early into the 2024 season, we already know of available drivers for 2025. Prema is said to be opening a two-car program, so Prema will have two drivers. But what two drivers should they pick? Before we get to my picks, let's go over the current driver market in IndyCar. Seemingly no spots will be open at Andretti Global, as all drivers are locked in, at least through 2025. Rosenquist is locked in through 2025 for Meyer Shank, and they have no reason to not keep David Maluka. He's driving very well, especially for someone who broke the wrist and hasn't been in an IndyCar since, last season. Rahal Letterman-Lanigan has an open seat because it was announced recently that Lundgaard would be leaving for McLaren. As for Dale Coyne, we have no idea. The 51 car has been consistently rotating drivers until this weekend in Toronto, and Jack Harvey might not keep that number 18 seat. McLaren should keep the same lineup, but also they should have given Rossi the contract he wanted, and they should have kept Theo Porcher instead of bringing on Nolan Siegel. However, we'll assume everyone keeps their seats. Foyt will seek to keep Ferrucci, with Stingray Rob potentially leaving, unless the money he is coughing up is good enough for the performances he's giving. Let's be honest, Stingray doesn't race that well, doesn't finish that well, and crashes a damn lot of machinery. He's been getting better at not doing it, but is the money he's giving them really enough for the performance he's giving? Hunkos, I believe, will keep the same lineup. Canapino's for sure staying, and I don't see why they would replace Grosjean despite his contract being out at the end of 2024. ECR has VK through 2024, who they will certainly keep. You'd be stupid not to keep VK as his performance has picked up back to the levels it was at a few years before. Rasmussen shares the number 20 with Ed. And after Rasmussen's incredible season, I'd say he's been having so far, I think you'd be stupid not to keep Christian Rasmussen. Penske will most certainly retain the same driver lineup unless Power decides to retire a year before his contract is up. Newgarden signed an extension, and McLaughlin will surely be signing an extension, and we'll hear about that soon enough. He's arguably been the best Penske driver this year. Ganassi has Lundqvist and Armstrong through 2025, and while Dixon and Pelot's contract lasts through 2024, two of the best drivers in the series, and it's a rumor that Pelot has already signed a private extension with Chip Ganassi. As for Scott Dixon, he chooses when he wants to retire because he's Scott Dixon. He's won consecutively in IndyCar for near enough 2 decades. He's been driving with Chip for near enough 2 decades. He's got 6 titles. He's got a slew of wins, a slew of pole positions. He's Mr. Inevitable. When a chaotic race happens, 9 times out of 10, Scott Dixon is your winner. It's just like clockwork. So, Dixon, he's locked in. The only person that I'd say is on rough terrain is Kiffin Simpson, who has been heavily underperforming in what is the top machinery of the field. A lot of drivers would die to have that seat. Chip hasn't pulled the plug on many drivers after 1 year, so I think Kiffin will keep his seat. So there are many options, but the for sure drivers without a seat are Theo Porcher and Alexander Rossi. In Formula One, it was announced recently that Kevin Magnussen would be returning to Haas. Well, as we know, some of us know, I should say, Magnussen did a one-off when he was getting ready for Peugeot's sports car program. He did a one-off in Indycar, replacing Rosenquist after he was injured at Detroit from a stuck throttle. Now, Magnussen did very well in that one-off for someone who hasn't touched an IndyCar. And for someone who has, he still did very well. Obviously, from the world of Formula One, we know Logan Sargent has been up for debate countless number of times. Without further ado, my first pick for Prema Racing would be Alexander Rossi. An obvious choice. Rossi is an experienced IndyCar driver who's driven with race-winning associations like Andretti Global. While Rossi hasn't been as great as he's been expected to be, you can't doubt that he is one of the better drivers on the grid despite his underperformance. On his day, he's an incredible driver. He could help Prema establish themselves as a competitive IndyCar organization with the experience he has. And he's arguably been the best McLaren driver this year on the IndyCar grid. I mean, the only reason he is not further up in the championship is because, well, Brian Barnhart doesn't know how to call strategies at all. Sorry, I reckon a 5-year-old could do better than him. I don't know how he's kept his job. It also helps for Rossi, though, that he rises to the occasion on the most important days on the IndyCar schedule. The month of May, the Indy 500. That is where Rossi shines the most. I mean, obviously, he won the Centennial Indy 500 in his rookie season after coming back to the States from Europe. It was his first win. And he's got a track record of consistently being quick at the speedway. He's got a 27th and a 29th place finish off of the top of my head. The only 2 finishes he has had outside the top 10. This guy's always up there. He would help Prema in their first few seasons. And Rossi, he's still got a decade left on his career as he's only 32. A part of the reason why it was surprising that McLaren wouldn't give him a long contract. He's only 32. We've got Scott Dixon and Will Power who are in their 40s. I believe they're both 43 at this point. I mean, sure, you could argue they're 2 definite Hall of Fame drivers, but Rossi, he's still an incredible driver. He's still got the potential, I believe, Rossi does. My second driver choice would have been Theo Porcher. Theo started to adapt well to IndyCar before McLaren once again switching out the driver of the number 6. Porcher is certainly a talent that I've rated highly for a few years, even before Formula 2, and it would benefit him to be working along with a driver who he was recently teammates with. Obviously, Rossi and Porcher were teammates for a brief stint at McLaren. However, amid rumors that Sauber are trying to get Porcher onto the Formula 1 grid for the 2025 season, my second driver choice is Logan Sargent. While Logan's still on the grid, as I said earlier, his seat has been up in the air for a long time, so he is my second pick. While someone like Louis Foster, a man who has been very dominant in Indy Next, is a very good pick for that second seat, Sargent has raced for Prema before when he battled for the Formula 3 championship against the likes of Oscar Piastri in 2020. Sargent has been on the hot seat as of this season, with his performances not improving at the start of the season. However, his performance has started to pick up, despite running inferior machinery to his teammate Alex Albon. Despite all of this, there have been many rumors surrounding his seat with the likes of Kimi Antonelli and Esteban Ocon replacing him mid-season. I think Logan has the ability to be a successful IndyCar driver, certainly, So if he doesn't retain a seat at the Formula One roundtable, Prema should look into making him their second driver and their long-term option. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. If you didn't, press the dislike button and tell me why in the comment section. This is Lewis, signing out.